The night Cecily Hargreave walked into a burning building and came out carrying a child that wasn't hers. She was still wearing the blazer from the board meeting she'd left 40 minutes early. That's not where the story starts, though. That's where it ends. Or close enough to it. Let me take you back to 6 weeks before that, to a Tuesday morning in February when the temperature in Calgary had dropped to -22, and Cecily was sitting in a glass-walled conference room on the 14th floor of her own company, being told she needed a husband. The man delivering this information was Gerald Fitch, her corporate attorney, who had the unfortunate habit of removing his glasses and cleaning them whenever he was about to say something he knew she wouldn't like. He was on his third cleaning now. The Alderwood acquisition requires board approval by March 15th, Gerald said, settling his glasses back onto his nose. And the Alderwood family has made it quite clear that they will not transfer controlling interest to an unmarried woman. Their words, not mine. Cecily did not throw her coffee mug. She considered it. It's 2024, she said. The Alderwood patriarch is 81 years old and has the values to match. Gerald pushed a folder across the table. There's a possibility, however. A gentleman has been identified who is amenable to a temporary arrangement. 12 months. You present as a couple at the necessary events. He receives a consulting fee and certain business considerations. The acquisition closes. Everyone walks away. Who is he? Gerald exchanged a look with Patricia Osei, the family liaison seated to his left, whose expression suggested she had already anticipated every question Cecily was about to ask. His name is Seth Callahan, Patricia said. He owns a small contracting company in the East End, residential renovations mostly. He has a daughter, 6 years old. He's private, very private, a contractor. Cecily looked at the folder but didn't open it. You want me to fake marry a contractor temporarily, Gerald said, for an 81-year-old man's feelings about unmarried women, for a $94 million acquisition, Ms. Hargreave. She opened the folder. Seth Callahan, 38. Dark hair, photographed at what appeared to be a school event, slightly blurry, the kind of photo taken in a hurry. No social media presence she could find. Small company, good reputation, 0 complaints filed with the Better Business Bureau over 6 years of operation. No criminal record. One daughter, the file said her name was Maeve. No mention of a mother. I meet him first, Cecily said. Patricia nodded like she'd expected that. Tomorrow, she said. 2 o'clock. He's agreed. The address they gave her was a job site in Inglewood, a Victorian semi-detached that Seth Callahan was in the middle of gutting to the studs. Cecily stood on the frozen sidewalk in her good coat and watched through the open front door as a man in work clothes crouched over a set of architectural drawings spread across a sawhorse. He was taller than she'd expected from the photo. He moved with a kind of deliberate efficiency that she recognized, the way people moved when they were used to physical work and didn't waste effort on anything unnecessary. When he finally looked up and saw her, his expression didn't change. Not surprise, not assessment, not the particular look men sometimes gave her when they were calculating what she was worth to them. Just, you're here. Okay. Mrs. Hargreave, he said, straightening, Seth Callahan. He didn't offer a hand because his was covered in plaster dust, and he was apparently too practical to do the performative thing of wiping it and offering anyway. You can call me Cecily, she said. We might as well start somewhere, sure. He pulled a bottle of water from a cooler near the wall, offered it to her. She declined. He drank, watching her. They told you what I am, what I do? They told me some things? They didn't tell you why I agreed to this. It wasn't a question, no. Seth looked back at the drawings on the sawhorse for a moment, like he was deciding something. Then he looked at her directly. My daughter starts a specialized speech program in September. There's a wait list. Private pay to skip it is $42,000. I don't have that, and I won't have it in time by doing things the normal way. He said it flat. No apology, no performance of embarrassment, just fact. So, I'm open to options. Cecily had expected many things from this meeting. She hadn't expected to respect him inside the first 2 minutes. I need to meet her, she said. Your daughter, before anything gets signed. Something shifted in his face. Not thawed exactly, but recalibrated. Why? Because if this arrangement means she's sharing her home with a stranger for a year, I'd like her to at least know I'm a real person before I show up with a suitcase. A long pause. Outside, wind moved down the street with that flat February efficiency that Calgary wind had, cutting through everything without drama. Thursday evening, Seth said finally. Come for dinner. She makes the rules about who she likes. I'll follow her lead. Maeve Callahan was 6 years old and had her father's dark eyes and a way of tilting her head when she was thinking that made her look like she was doing math. She communicated in a mixture of spoken words, a tablet she carried like a clipboard, and an elaborate system of expression that Seth read fluently, and Cecily spent the whole dinner trying to learn. She's asking if you like dogs, Seth said, watching his daughter's hands. I do. I grew up with a lab named Clover. Maeve typed something on the tablet and showed it to Cecily. The screen said, "We don't have a dog because Dad says our yard is too small, but I think he is wrong." She has a point about the yard, Cecily said. Seth looked at his daughter. Don't recruit allies. Maeve's expression was the picture of innocence. The dinner was salmon and roasted vegetables. Nothing complicated, but good. Seth cooked with the same careful efficiency he did everything else, moving around the kitchen in a small house that was scrupulously clean and personalized in ways that were all Maeve. Crayon drawings pinned to the fridge, a bookshelf overflowing with picture books and nature encyclopedias, a collection of small rocks arranged by color on the windowsill. After dinner, Maeve led Cecily to the rock collection and explained each one with her tablet and her hands: a piece of sandstone from the Badlands, Lake Superior agate, fool's gold from a school trip. She's incredible, Cecily said quietly, when Maeve had gone to get ready for bed. Seth was rinsing plates at the sink. He didn't answer for a moment. Yeah, he said finally, the word carrying weight she didn't have enough context to read yet. She is. Cecily looked at the rock collection, at the crayon drawings, at the small specific evidence of a father who paid attention. What happened to her mother? The water ran. Seth set a plate on the rack. She left when Maeve was 18 months old, decided the life wasn't what she wanted. He said it without anger, which somehow made it worse, like he'd processed it so thoroughly it had become neutral. It's just been the two of us since. Before she could say anything, Maeve reappeared in dinosaur pajamas, dragging a very old stuffed bear and looking at Cecily with those evaluating eyes. Then she walked over, climbed onto the couch beside Cecily, and leaned her head against her arm. Seth watched this from the kitchen doorway. His expression was unreadable, but Cecily caught something underneath it. The careful vigilance of a father who'd learned that hope was a thing you handled gently because it broke. She signed the papers 2 days later. The arrangement moved them into a house in Mount Royal, a place that had been leased through one of the corporate accounts and furnished in a style that suggested established couple without tipping into anything personal. Cecily had her own room. Seth had the suite at the end of the hall. Maeve had a room with a loft bed and a window that looked out at the backyard elm. The first morning, Cecily came downstairs to find Seth already in the kitchen, coffee made, Maeve at the table with her tablet and a bowl of oatmeal, conducting what appeared to be serious communication with the stuffed bear. There's a second mug, Seth said, without turning from the stove. It was such a small thing. She filed it away without quite knowing why. The professional piece started Monday. Cecily walked into Hargreave Capital in the same navy blazer she'd worn for 9 years of board meetings, except now her LinkedIn profile had a husband, and the Alderwood family had been informed. The closing meeting was in 3 weeks. Until then, performance. What she hadn't anticipated was Seth being good at it. He appeared at the Alderwood introductory dinner in a suit that fit like it had been made for him. Not expensive, but exact. And he moved through a room full of old Alberta money with a quiet self-possession that nobody quite knew what to do with. He didn't perform. He didn't try to match the room's register. He just stood next to Cecily and was completely, uncomplicatedly himself. Your husband is interesting, Gordon Alderwood told her during a moment when Seth had stepped away. The old man was studying Seth across the room with an expression that might have been respect. Not what I expected. He rarely is, Cecily said. What she noticed, and kept noticing over the days that followed, was that Seth never asked for a briefing. She'd prepared talking points, backstory, the kind of detail work that made a fake relationship feel solid. He didn't need them. He asked her real questions instead, over the dinners they had to share because Maeve insisted they all eat together. What was the first company she'd built and lost? What did she actually like about the acquisition business underneath the achievement of it? Why Calgary? Why Calgary? She repeated. You grew up in Halifax. The company could headquarter anywhere. So why here? I wanted somewhere I'd have to earn it, she said. Somewhere nobody knew my family name. He looked at her across the table in a way that made her feel briefly and uncomfortably like a window someone had just looked through. Did it work? Ask me in another 10 years. Maeve watched this exchange with quiet satisfaction and showed Seth her tablet. He read it and shook his head. No, I'm not telling her what you said. What did she say? Cecily asked. That you two are the same kind of stubborn. 3 weeks into the arrangement, Cecily's CFO called her into his office for a meeting that had the specific energy of bad news being dressed up in professional language. The Alderwood timeline's been pushed, Douglas Webb said, settling into his chair with the careful neutrality of a man who'd already decided what was going to happen and was waiting for you to catch up. They've requested an extension. 45 days. 45 more days. On what grounds? Due diligence. additional review of the leadership structure. Douglas set a tablet on the desk showing a document she could already tell she wasn't going to like. They've also raised a concern about continuity, specifically about whether a CEO with recent personal life changes has the stability for a long-term stewardship relationship. My personal life changes are the reason we're in this conversation, Douglas. I know that. The board is wondering whether the arrangement appears genuine enough. The word genuine landed in an interesting way. What are they suggesting? More visibility. The Alderwood family wants to see you and your husband at the Heritage Foundation Gala next month. And there's a site visit to the Bragg Creek property. Family weekend, essentially. He looked at her with something that might have been sympathy, or might have been the calculation of someone deciding how much to tell her. I want to see this deal close as much as you do. I'm just telling you what they need. Cecily told Seth that evening. He was in the backyard with Maeve, who was in a puffy coat that made her look like a small, determined marshmallow, investigating something at the base of the elm tree. He listened without interrupting, which she'd learned was simply how he processed things, fully, without the performance of response. Bragg Creek, he said. A weekend. We'd take Maeve. He looked at his daughter, who had now produced a magnifying glass from somewhere, and was crouching in the frozen mud with complete commitment to whatever she was examining. She'll like that, he said. She's been asking about the mountains. You're not going to argue about it? He looked at her with something that might have been the closest he came to amusement. We made an agreement. I don't break agreements. A pause. Besides, Douglas Webb has been trying to push you out of your own company for 2 years. I checked. She went still. How do you know about Douglas Webb? You had a stack of memos on the kitchen table Tuesday morning. I wasn't reading them, but I read fast. Those were confidential memos. Then don't leave them on the kitchen table. He turned back to watch Maeve. He's building a case against you. Has been for a while. The Alderwood extension is too convenient for him. Someone told them to delay. Cecily stood in the backyard with her mind working fast and cold. She'd had a version of that suspicion already, shapeless, unconfirmed. Hearing it said plainly, without drama, by a man who had no stake in corporate politics and therefore no reason to be anything but straightforward, it landed differently. How do you know this? She asked. I don't know it. I'm telling you what it looks like from the outside. He glanced at her. Sometimes people outside the system see it clearer. You're too close. Cecily thought about that for most of the night. The gala was black tie, held in the Telus Convention Center with the kind of glacial floral arrangements that cost more than Cecily's first apartment. She wore a dark green dress that Clara at the office had helped her pick. Seth wore a suit she'd never seen before, charcoal, exactly right, and stood next to her through introductions and champagne toasts with the same composed self-possession he brought to everything. Gordon Alderwood found them near the windows. Mr. Callahan, the old man said, what is it you do again? Renovations, mostly. Older homes. Seth smiled, easy, unhurried. I like things that were built to last. Finding out why they're still standing. Gordon looked at him for a long moment. My father built houses. Good houses. He nodded, something decided in his expression. You should bring your family to Bragg Creek. We'll talk more there. After he moved on, Cecily spoke quietly without turning her head. You're surprisingly good at this. I just told him the true thing, Seth said, equally quiet. She looked at him sideways. He was watching the room with those steady eyes that caught everything. The true thing works because you're not saying it to impress anyone. Most people are, he said. It shows. Douglas found them later, near the bar, his smile the particular calibrated warmth of a man who'd decided to seem pleased. Cecily, and the husband. He extended a hand to Seth. Douglas Webb. I run the financial operations at Hargreave Capital. I know who you are, Seth said, shaking it. Something flickered in Douglas's expression. Good. Then you know how much we all want to see this acquisition succeed. I know what you've told Cecily about what you want. Seth held his gaze pleasantly. I'd imagine the list of things you actually want is a bit different. A silence that lasted exactly 1 beat too long. Enjoy the evening, Seth said, and turned to Cecily as though Douglas had ceased to exist. That night, driving home through the cold, Cecily said, You just made an enemy. He already was one. Better he knows you know. She turned to look at him. He was watching the road, hands easy on the wheel, completely settled. She'd spent years in rooms full of people performing confidence, and she was only now realizing how different it looked from the real thing. The Bragg Creek weekend arrived with clear skies and the kind of mountain light that made Alberta feel like it was showing off. Maeve pressed her face against the car window the whole drive, cataloging everything. Elk, frozen creek, the pattern of shadows on the snowfield. I want to live here, she typed, and showed it to Seth without looking away from the window. I know, he said. The Alderwood property was a timber frame lodge with a view of the foothills that did something to the chest when you first saw it. Gordon met them at the door and immediately crouched down to Maeve's eye level, which was either rehearsed or genuine, and Cecily watched Maeve assess him for about 4 seconds before showing him her tablet with a photograph of the elk they'd passed on the highway. "Saw that same bull last week," Gordon said, studying it seriously. "He's been coming down from the ridge. Good eyes you have." Maeve's expression indicated she had already decided Gordon Alderwood was acceptable. That evening, around a fire with Gordon and his daughter Fern, Cecily found herself talking more than she usually did in professional settings. About her first acquisition, which had been a disaster. About the years she'd spent earning credibility in a room where people expected her to explain herself before she could speak. About the specific particular loneliness of building something from the ground with no one to call when things went sideways at 10 o'clock on a Thursday. Seth sat nearby listening, saying little, but at some point he'd shifted, almost imperceptibly, so that his shoulder was against hers. She didn't move away. Later, when Maeve was asleep in the lodge's small bunk room, Cecily stood on the porch in the cold with a mug of tea she wasn't really tasting. Seth came out a few minutes later, stood beside her. "She asked me tonight," he said, "whether you were going to stay." The words landed carefully. "What did you tell her?" "I told her that wasn't something I could promise for her." He looked at the dark outline of the mountains. "I don't lie to her about things that are real, even to protect her from being hurt, especially then." He was quiet. "She's already learned that people leave. I'd rather she know that some things are uncertain than believe everything is permanent. She's smart enough to handle uncertainty. She's 6. She doesn't need certainty. She needs honesty." Cecily wrapped both hands around the mug. Below the porch, the snow was blue-gray in the moonlight. "She asked me the same thing. What did you say?" "I said I didn't know." She paused. "Which is true. I don't know what the next 6 months look like." "But," he said. She looked at him. "What?" There was a but in that sentence. She nearly said no, there wasn't. Then stopped because he was right, and she had the specific uncomfortable sense that he usually was about things like this. "But I'm not looking for the door anymore." The fire popped somewhere inside. In the dark, the mountains were still. Back in Calgary, things shifted. Not dramatically. Not in the way they did in the kinds of stories where everything changed on a single night. Just incrementally. The kitchen table felt less like a shared rental space, and more like a kitchen table. Maeve had taken to leaving small things on Cecily's desk when she worked from home. A particularly good rock, a drawing, once a page torn from a nature encyclopedia about Arctic foxes with a sticky note reading "Because you said you liked foxes," Seth said. Cecily put the Arctic fox page on her actual desk. At the office. Then Douglas moved. It came through legal, a formal complaint filed with the board questioning the legitimacy of the acquisition process, citing the speed of the personal arrangement, suggesting conflicts of interest. It was crafted specifically to require investigation, which would require time, which would push the Alderwood closing date past the window Gordon had committed to. Jennifer Ochoa, her head of legal, brought her the documents at 8 in the morning with the expression of someone who had been up since 5 processing what they meant. "He's been building this for months," Jennifer said. "He has correspondence between himself and 2 board members. He approached them before the Alderwood deal was announced. He was already positioning for a leadership transition." Cecily read the documents with a stillness that people who knew her recognized as the state directly preceding decisive action. "Who do we have on the board who hasn't been contacted?" 4 members. 2 are solidly yours. 2 are uncertain. Get me a meeting with both uncertain votes by end of day. There's something else." Jennifer set another page on the desk. "He has questions about Seth, about the nature of the arrangement." "What kind of questions?" "He's suggesting the marriage is a contractual arrangement and not a genuine relationship." Outside her window, Calgary's downtown was going about its morning. Cranes on 3 construction projects she could see from here, all of them probably with permits issued through companies like Seth's. "Let him suggest it," she said. "He'd have to prove it." She called Seth from the car. "Douglas filed a formal complaint," she said. "He's going after the board. He's also going after us, suggesting the marriage is a staged arrangement." A pause. "Not the stunned kind, the thinking kind. He can't prove that without someone who'll testify to it," Seth said. "No, but an investigation delays the Alderwood close." "That's enough damage. What do you need?" She stopped at a light. The heater was running and the windows were slightly fogged, and she was struck, briefly and inconveniently, by the fact that she'd said, "What do you need?" to approximately no one over the course of her career, and this man said it as a reflex. "I need the board," she said, "and I need time." "I'll handle the time part," Seth said. She was going to ask what that meant. He'd already ended the call. What it meant, she found out 3 hours later when Jennifer came back into her office and said Douglas Webb had called an emergency meeting of his own, which had been interrupted by a visit from the Calgary Economic Development Office regarding some discrepancies in the financial filings of a company Douglas had quietly been consulting for while employed at Hargreave Capital. A direct conflict of interest, not fabricated, not even particularly hidden, just never examined. Seth had not found this. But Seth had known where to point someone who would. She went to the board that afternoon. She laid out the Alderwood relationship, the actual relationship, including how it had started, what she'd built, why it mattered. She talked about what the company could be in 5 years if the acquisition closed. She was honest about Douglas's maneuvering in a way that was professional and precise and left no room for doubt. She won 4 votes. The 5th abstained. That night she came home to a kitchen that smelled like garlic and something with rosemary, Maeve in her loft with a flashlight and 3 books, and Seth at the stove in the same calm he brought to job sites. "It worked," she said, dropping her bag by the door. He glanced back. "Yeah, how did you know where to look?" "I didn't. I called someone who did." He stirred something, set down the spoon. "I spent 4 years working on a project Douglas Webb was attached to, early in his career. He was cutting corners then. People like that don't change the habit, just the scale. You knew him. I knew his type." From the loft, Maeve's voice drifted down, a low, sustained hum she sometimes made when she was absorbed in something. Cecily stood in the doorway of the kitchen and felt the specific quality of the moment in a way she wasn't used to feeling, completely inside it, not already moving to the next thing. "What you did," she said. "You didn't have to. You'd have gotten there yourself." He turned back to the stove. "I just moved the timeline. Seth." He waited. "Thank you." He looked at her then, fully, the way he'd looked at her on the Bragg Creek porch. "I know what it cost you to build this," he said. "I wasn't going to watch someone take it." The fire alarm went off 11 days before the Alderwood closing. It wasn't their building. It was the apartment complex 3 blocks over, a 1970s mid-rise that Seth had done contract work in twice over the years. Cecily heard it from the park where she'd been walking, turned and saw the smoke column going up into the gray November sky. She was already moving before she'd decided to move. What she found when she got there: 2 fire engines, evacuated residents in coats on the sidewalk, a section of the 3rd floor with visible damage, and Seth, who had arrived somehow before her, speaking to a firefighter near the entrance. She had no idea how he got there first. And then a woman on the sidewalk, grabbing at the sleeve of anyone who would listen, saying she couldn't find her son, that her son was on the 2nd floor, she'd been in the laundry room, he was 5 years old, he was alone in the apartment. The firefighter Seth was talking to turn toward the building. So did Seth. Cecily grabbed his arm. He looked at her. "I know where 2C is," he said. "I've been in there, let the firefighters. They're managing the 3rd floor. The 2nd floor east stairwell is clear, I can see from the smoke pattern." He was already removing his jacket. "I'll be 60 seconds. Seth, 60 seconds. She let go. She stood on the sidewalk in November cold and watched the door he'd gone through and counted. The mother beside her was crying. Cecily put her arm around her without thinking, holding her up, watching the door. At 48 seconds, Seth came back out with a 5-year-old boy under his arm, both of them coughing, Seth's left arm marked dark along the forearm where he'd taken contact with something. The mother made a sound Cecily had never heard before and ran. Seth walked to the curb and sat down on it heavily. A paramedic reached him in seconds. Cecily reached him in 2. "You said 60 seconds, she said. I was under." He looked up at her, eyes watering from smoke. He'd gone under the bed. The paramedic was checking his arm, not serious, a burn real but manageable. Seth was watching her face with an expression she couldn't catalog. "You're furious," he said. She stopped. She sat down on the curb beside him. The paramedic tactfully moved 1 step back. "Yes," she said. "I'm furious. I had eyes on the whole situation. You don't know that. I'm careful, Cecily. You went into a burning building. I came back out." She turned to look at him on the curb in the gray November afternoon, jacket gone, arm bandaged now, smoke still in his hair. The child was in his mother's arms, 20 feet away, crying and fine. "That's not something I can just." She stopped again. There was something in her chest that was not a professional feeling, not a strategic feeling, not anything she had a framework for. "Don't do that again. If there's a kid under a bed, don't do it without telling me you're coming back." Her voice came out quieter than she'd intended. "Just tell me you're coming back." Seth looked at her for a long moment. "Okay," he said. "I'll tell you." She didn't realize she'd taken his hand until she was already holding it. She didn't let go. The Alderwood closing happened on a Wednesday morning in a boardroom that smelled like old wood and coffee, which was how boardrooms always smelled in Cecily's experience. as though the industry ran on those two things. Gordon Alderwood signed with a fountain pen. Cecily signed with the pen she'd been using since her first company, a $7 ballpoint she'd refused to replace on principle. "Your husband," Gordon said after the final page. "I like him." "I know," Cecily said. "He tends to have that effect. He said something to me in Bragg Creek that I've been thinking about." Gordon capped his own pen. He said, "The best things in this world are the things that were built to last, and the way you know they'll last is that they were built, honestly, by someone who cared what happened to them when they weren't watching." Cecily was quiet for a moment. He said that about houses. I imagine he meant it about more than houses. Gordon stood, extended his hand. "Welcome to the partnership, Ms. Hargreave," she told Seth that evening, standing in the kitchen while Maeve was at the table with her tablet, looking up elk migration patterns with the focused intensity she brought to all serious research. "He quoted you," Cecily said. "I know. He told me he was going to." Seth half smiled, which on his face was the equivalent of a full grin from almost anyone else. She looked at him. "The contract is up in 6 months. I know the arrangement has met its terms." "I know that too." Maeve looked up from her tablet, looked between them, and very deliberately returned her attention to Elk. Cecily set down her mug. "I don't want to do this the arrangement way anymore." Seth was still. "I want to do it the real way," she said. "Which I understand is an unusual offer coming from someone who put the terms in writing and had your lawyer initial each page." "It was my lawyer," Seth said. "Gerald Fitch's calligraphy is terrible. That's what you have to say about this." "No." He moved around the counter. He stopped in front of her with that same unhurried certainty he brought to everything. "I have other things to say about it. I've had them for a while." "How long?" "Since you sat down next to me on that curb." Maeve showed her tablet to neither of them specifically, just held it up in the general direction of the room. It read, "Finally." They laughed, the kind that didn't need explaining. 6 months later, Cecily Hargreave and Seth Callahan were married in a courthouse in Inglewood, 2 blocks from the first job site she'd come to find him. It was not a large ceremony. Maeve wore a blue dress and carried the Lake Superior agate in her coat pocket for good luck, because good luck deserved to be present at important things. Gerald Fitch attended, and his expression suggested a complicated mixture of professional satisfaction and relief. The reception was dinner at the kitchen table, the real kitchen table, the one in the house that had become theirs in the months since the arrangement ended, and was replaced by something that had no name in any contract. Maeve sat between them and ate her salmon with careful attention, and then showed them her tablet. "This is my favorite day," it read, "except for the Elk Day, but this is close." Seth looked at Cecily across the top of his daughter's head. The light in the kitchen was ordinary kitchen light, yellow and warm, the kind of light that didn't ask anything of you and just let you be in a room. She'd spent years building for the future, chasing the next thing, measuring success in acquisitions and projections and board votes. She hadn't understood until this moment that she'd been doing it because she was looking for something to come home to, something to last. "Same kind of stubborn," she said. He smiled, really smiled, the full one she'd been collecting evidence of since February. "Yeah," he said. "Good thing."